Hey everyone, welcome to the Inflammation Nation podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Steve Noseworthy.
One of the greatest obstacles to crafting health and wellness is identifying and controlling inflammation. It's at the core of all complex and chronic diseases. And it's the driving mechanism that underlies the most common symptoms that people like you struggle to overcome. Join us as we explore cutting-edge science and research to give you the information and tools you need to create the quality of life you want and deserve. And now, here is the host of Inflammation Nation, Dr. Stephen Noseworthy.
So in the last 2 episodes, I've shared my updated clinical model that maps your health journey through 3 distinct stages. And if you remember, every couple of years, I sit back and reflect on how things have changed in my thinking, in the research and clinical practice. And I try to re-strategize and order my thought process to keep it in line with how things advance and change. And this is very important, particularly in any industry. It's not unique to the industry of health and wellness or functional medicine specifically. This is true of all industries, is that if you don't stay on top of things, you end up getting left behind. And as a clinician, it's important for me because I stand in this stead. I stand in that place of making decisions and recommendations for people that affect their quality of life. And I take that very seriously. And so what I've done, if you've been listening for the past couple of episodes, again, we're talking about this 3-stage journey where we go from states of dysfunction where you're symptomatic and quality of life isn't great to the way things are supposed to be, the way things are designed to be. And that is just being full of vital capacity. And so as a quick reminder for the first 2 stages, the first stage in this journey is called the restoration stage. And it's dominated by the theme of restoring baseline function in core systems. And this is where we engage in active problem solving by defining your root cause disruptors and devising targeted and personalized diagnostics, finding your ideal diet, adopting balanced lifestyle strategies, and using targeted and personalized nutritional supplements to take you from, again, various states of dysfunction to how your body is designed to work. And if we're paying attention through, say, the 6 or 8 months it takes for most people to work through the restoration stage, we end up with a solid understanding of your metabolic vulnerabilities, your weak spots, if you will. We can spot and identify your flare pattern and your flare sequence, and we can define your sticking points, those things that are not responding and changing as quickly as others. And we continue this first stage of restoration until we get roughly 75% improvement across the board, not focusing on any one particular complaint. And we do that, we try to hit this milestone before we consider merging into the next stage of the journey. And that second stage, I'm currently calling the optimization stage. We could probably also call it the stabilization stage, because that stage is all about maintaining progress from stage 1 and building metabolic stability and resilience. If you recall, the longer that you have been unwell, and the more complex your situation is, the more likely it is that your systems and your cells have gone through some degree of metabolic reprogramming. And this is the process by which your metabolism learns abnormal ways of operating, right? Maintaining states of dysfunction that have become plastic in the sense that they resist change back to what's considered normal. And the biggest tool that we have to unwind metabolic programming or reprogramming is time. The longer you spend practicing the things that help restore baseline function from stage 1, the more opportunity you give your body to relearn what it has forgotten. Of course, this demands that you first go through the restoration process, because it's in that stage that you discover how to unwind your specific patterns of dysfunction and where you need to focus your efforts on deprogramming or reprogramming your metabolism. To say it another way, and to borrow a phrase from exercise science, time under protocol is your best friend. Time under protocol is your best friend. So not only do we want to see you advance beyond 75% improvement, like once you get to the maintenance or the optimization stage, and when I say maintain your improvement, it doesn't mean I want you to be stuck there, right? At 75%. Of course, we want to see you progress beyond that. And you may have noticed that short-term programs work great while you do them. But once you stop, like it doesn't take long for things to backslide to how things were before you started the program. And that's why I'm not really a fan of, say, I don't know, a 10-day gut cleanse or detox or a 5-day challenge, something that's isolated and short term. And it's not part of a larger framework like this 3-stage journey that I'm laying out for you. And that's not to say that people can't benefit from doing an online 5-day challenge or a 10-day detox. Some do it, and some do get that benefit in the sense that it might help rule in or rule out an area that needs work. Meaning that if you do a short form, say it's an online detox program, and it gives you some benefit, some relief, obviously now you know how you're reacting to and handling your environment needs some attention. But on the other hand, if you do a short form program and nothing changes, either whatever that program focused on was not a problem area for you, or it was, but maybe the way the program was structured was wrong for you as an individual, or perhaps it was right and you just simply needed more time than that short form program afforded you. Anyone who does a short form challenge or program and gets a lot out of it, the implication is that they have very few root cause disruptors and perhaps less complex problems that have been there for a shorter period of time. So these short form programs are okay for some people, but they fail when you get into complex and chronic situations, which is my clientele, right? And if you're listening to the Inflammation Nation podcast, I'm willing to bet that short form approach probably doesn't fit you either, because more than likely you have more complex and chronic issues. That's just simply the people that tend to find their way to me and to the podcast. Understand too that stage 2 builds on stage 1, right? In stage 1, we're overcoming primary metabolic obstacles. In stage 2, we try to hardwire those changes into your system using effective protocols and letting your body stay in a state of well-being or better function for sufficient time under protocol. And during the second stage, what we look for your flare episodes to be less frequent, less intense, and short-lived. And when flares do happen, we want to see you bounce back and recover faster. And we want to see fewer flare triggers, meaning that some of the things that would have set you off before now don't. And we do expect you to flare up from time to time. Like even with the best of programs and the most diligent compliance, you can't predict everything that's going to happen to you in the future. You can't control all of your flare triggers ahead of time. And so it is expected when someone even successfully goes through a program like the kind of ones that I put together for people, they're going to flare up. And that's just the nature of the beast. The key is to understand the things that drive the flare up and how to minimize them. I also want to see evidence that my clients have expanded their physical, emotional, and cognitive capacities, meaning that they can do more. They can show up in life in bigger ways for their family, for their friends, even for themselves. And I want to see them restart the things that they had stopped entirely or had been avoiding before because it tended to crash their systems. For me, it's a great day, always a great day, when someone says to me, hey, I can play with my kids or my grandkids again, or I can go on a trip that I've been putting off for years, or I can go on a 2-hour hike. I can go to the gym. I can work in the garden or whatever. And I can listen to the joy in their voices, knowing that life can be good for them again. And these people who hit this transition point, they start to look to the future with hope and not despair. And that brings us to the third and final stage of the journey, which is the vitality stage. Perhaps the most common mistake I see with people who are trying to do it on their own, right? The whole DIY approach, and they're doing their best to get better on their own, is they tend to consume hours and hours of podcasts and maybe webinars and master classes, and they latch on to any strategy or tactic that's attached to the concept, especially of longevity these days. That's been the focus with all the talking heads on the internet for a few years now, and for good reason, and of course to great benefit for some people. But listen to me, if you're doing all the hacks, if you're doing cold plunges and red light therapy, and you're trying to force intermittent fasting when your body doesn't handle it well, and you're wearing gadgets and gizmos all in the name of longevity, but if you haven't identified your root cause disruptors that are causing your health issues, and you haven't spent enough time under protocol with core and efficient and effective protocols to reach at least 75% improvement, if you haven't achieved some sort of metabolic reprogramming, then all the longevity hacks in the world are going to bring partial, temporary, perhaps minimal improvement. And this is why it's so important to take the long view, to see your path forward for what it is. It's a journey with distinct stages of progression. And good strategies fail more often than not because they're the right thing at the wrong time. In fact, let me say that again because that's really important. Good strategies fail more often than not because they're the right thing at the wrong time. They have value, but for where you are right now in your journey, it might not be the right fit. And this third stage of vitality is all focused on fostering longevity and maintaining functional capacity into the future. And flirting with the idea of renaming this stage the vital capacity stage, which I'll probably do. Vital capacity in its traditional physiological context actually comes from the world of respiratory health or pulmonology. And vital capacity in that sense refers to the maximum volume of air that someone can exhale after they've taken in the deepest breath that they can take in. And it serves as an indicator of pulmonary function and respiratory health. However, if we interpret the concept of vital capacity a little bit more broadly and expansively as a metaphor for overall human vitality, not just focused on the lungs, that extends its application to encompassing integrated wellness across multiple body systems that collectively enable optimal function and resilience. That's what I mean by vital capacity, everything working together at higher levels of operation. And in this broader framework, vital capacity can be conceptualized as the comprehensive potential for health and wellness, where vitality arises from the harmonious interplay of physiological, psychological, and environmental factors. For instance, cardiovascular efficiency contributes by ensuring adequate oxygen and nutrient delivery via efficient circulation, and that supports energy production and building endurance. Musculoskeletal integrity provides structural support and mobility, and it facilitates physical activity, all of which enhance your metabolism. And then neurological and endocrine systems regulate stress responses and hormone balance, influencing mental clarity and emotional stability. And additionally, immune function acts as a safeguard against invaders, while gastrointestinal health optimizes nutrient absorption, underpinning sustained energy in your body's repair and recovery capacity. And this holistic whole person perspective understands that deficits in any single system can diminish overall vital capacity, leading to reduced quality of life. We live in a world where the major cause of morbidity and mortality is still cardiovascular and neurodegenerative diseases. And while most of us are perhaps more scared of cancer as the ultimate boogeyman, the truth is that year after year, twice as many people die from heart attacks, strokes, and brain degenerative diseases than all cancers combined. So we're talking about 22 million deaths from heart attacks and strokes compared to 10 million deaths per year from cancer. And if we accept this truth, then we're obligated to do everything that we can to reduce the long-term risk of death from cardiovascular and neurovascular problems. But as I've said before, it's not enough to simply want to live longer. You want to live better longer, or to live longer and better, meaning that I personally would much rather have a high quality of functionality during a shorter lifespan than live a long life where I'm eventually confined to an old age home and have to have someone feed me and bathe me and, dare I say, wipe my backside. And this is why the vitality or the vital capacity stage has to focus on not just the longevity piece, but the functional capacity piece as well. And that can be a big job for some people, but here's the good news. Like the things that you do to restore baseline function in stage one and to maintain progress and optimize function, build stability and resilience in stage two, the more time you practice the tactics and strategies that resolve your bad metabolic reprogramming, the more that you are doing to mitigate the risk of early death and fragility. And if you have been listening to any of the longevity experts online, you've probably heard two themes repeated over and over again. And they're true, and I'll repeat them now. Longevity is built on the base of your VO2 max, and your functional capacity is built on the foundation of your muscle mass and your ability to generate force, otherwise your overall physical strength. And I'm going to quote a world-famous strength coach named Mark Ripito. He said in one of his books, and he said it in seminars, strong people are simply harder to kill. But here's the conundrum that we face. We're often faced, especially with, say, my one-on-one clients. Many of them have lost their tolerance to exercise. And for some, even the simplest physical exertion causes them to crash. So they can't do more than a short walk. They can't lift weights. Some can't even do simple household chores without paying consequences. Now, to be fair, some can still work out, but they've had to modify their workouts or else they flare up, meaning they still have reduced capacity, but they haven't stopped altogether. But all of this means that people end up doing less and less and less, and that tells me that they've lost their vital capacity. And so if someone's starting out with very low exercise tolerance, which is very common in my clientele, yet exercise in the form or forms of cardio and resistance training are the way to build vitality and longevity, how do you reconcile that? Like, I know I need to exercise, but I can't exercise because exercise makes me worse. We're faced with this with my one-on-one coaching clients all the time. So there are no more powerful strategies that you can employ that outperform an ideal diet for you and an exercise program that challenges you to adapt and improve from whatever your starting point is. And I've said many times, even on this podcast, you can't out-medicate or out-supplement a bad diet or being deconditioned and weak. There is no such thing as exercise in a pill. And, setting the diet piece aside and focusing just on the exercise piece, if you can't exercise sufficiently because you're metabolically compromised, yet exercise is the very thing that you need to do to have longevity and to avoid that fragility of old age, does it not make sense that somewhere in the flow of the first stage of restoration and that second stage of optimization or stabilization, that exercise should be introduced not just as a kind of like an expectation, but actually as a therapeutic tool, right? And as it turns out, when someone has very low exercise tolerance as they start their journey, it's the very root cause disruptors that we work on in stage one that are why someone has low exercise tolerance, the inflammatory load, the blood sugar problems, the poor oxygen delivery may be associated with anemias, the stress chemistry, leaky gut, and the impairment of nutrient absorption or malabsorption from dysbiosis in the gut, right? So the question about when to introduce exercise as a tool, again, not just as an ideal, but as a therapeutic tool, something that we use to help people get better. The answer to that is at the earliest possible time, right? I want my clients exercising as early as possible, even if that takes the form of just simply going for a 5-minute walk. Everybody has to start somewhere. So as you can see, while I separate the journey into distinct stages, they're actually really one continuous flow. But to make sense of the process and the milestones along the way, we have to create these mental divisions so that we can have an intelligent conversation about the process. Your entire journey is too long and too large to think about it just as a single entity. So we break it up into manageable and understandable pieces where we plan and we execute and we track progress and we reconfigure. And we're always revisiting the question, are we doing the right things? And if so, how long do we do this for? So let me end with this thought. The first two stages, restoration and optimization or restoration and stabilization, represent discrete timeframes, meaning they have starting and end points. And those starting and end points, or especially the end points, are going to differ for every person. But the final stage of building your vital capacity to include longevity, quality of life, that's a never-ending process. There is no end to that. There's no end, right? You should be doing these things until the day that you leave this earth. And some of what you must employ and practice in that final stage of your journey, you can only discover by first going through restoration and optimization. And like if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, I know I should be exercising, that's just part of being healthy, and I keep trying and I keep failing because something goes wrong and I feel worse. And I've had this dwindling capacity where at first it just took me longer to recover between workouts, but I could still do it if I gave myself more time off, to the next stage where you realize I can only do half as much as I used to in the gym, to the point, the final stage where I can't do anything. Like I've just stopped exercising because everything makes me worse. Then you've got some work to do in stages 1 and probably 2 before you get to the point where you can use exercise as a therapeutic tool. So I truly hope that this helped you sort out your own thoughts about your personal journey, where you are and what you think your next step might be. And if you feel like it's too much to manage on your end, why don't you reach out using the link in the episode description or find the contact form on my website, drnoseworthy.com, and let's chat about what it takes to become a client. And let's see what a journey looks like for you. Thanks, guys, for listening, and I'll see you again on the next episode of the Inflammation Nation. This podcast is for general informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine in any form or capacity. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of the information in this podcast or any materials associated with or linked to the podcast is at the listener's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional and personalized medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and listeners should not disregard or delay obtaining proper medical advice when a health condition exists and warrants that. And finally, functional medicine is not intended or designed to treat disease, but rather is a natural approach to support restoring health and wellness. The use of diet and lifestyle modifications and nutritional supplementation is supportive or adjunctive care.